and welcome to Ancestral Recall. I'm your host, Eli Kaplan. In this show, we're looking back at 20 years of Magic's history. Today's story is about the last set in Odyssey block, Judgment. Let's give this set its fair day in court. Why listen to my stories? Because my stories are best stories. So Judgment is a tough set to look at. It's the last set of Odyssey block, and it follows up Torment. Now, Torment was the black set. Everybody knew it was the blackest set in Magic, and that made it stand out. Judgment's biggest problem is that it's hard to remember that it's the white and green set. Two colors fighting it out for who gets to be the top dog. Well, despite the fact that all the gold cards in the set are Selesnya flavored and all the lands have to do with green or white mana, well, when you share the spotlight, no one really gets to be top dog. And that drags Judgment down from being quite as memorable. If you opened up the pack, there's a very strong chance that there just aren't enough white or green cards to really make an impression. This is a bad set in terms of as fan. I was listening to Rosewater in his Drive to Work episode this week on Torment, where he was talking about how he felt that Torment should have pushed further, had even more black cards. Well, I feel the same way with that set, and I feel the same way with Judgment. We didn't have enough green and white cards in the set to really just drive home the fact that this is those colors' specialty. So that's a bit of a failure for the set. Opening packs, well, it just feels like you get a bunch of cards and that's it. Numerically, the set fixes the imbalance in the block Torment created with 33 green and white spells, 27 blue and red spells, and 16 black spells. 4 gold spells and 3 lands fill out the set. There aren't any new mechanics in this set per se, but one of the things that Wizards tried to do to make Threshold a more dynamic mechanic was to create a few cards that would shut down Threshold by returning opponents' cards from their graveyard to their hand. That's the new tech, right? So it keeps them off Threshold, and, let's check out these poster children. What? I can't believe Wizards thought people would go for that. How far will players go to get removal? Well, here's how far, right here. There are abilities with drawbacks, and then there's abilities with drawbacks. For what it's worth, if you want to get rid of graveyards with a guy, in lots of formats, try Yatan Grunts from Cold Snap. But Judgment did get some amazing Threshold cards. There were no new Madness cards, though. And you know what? I was really sad because we didn't see any more Madness cards until Time Spiral block. The pre-release promo was Tehillah, the Hebrew language version of Glory. I remember attending a local Japanese pre-release and telling the judge how to say the name of the card, because people were staring at the promos, bewildered by the right-to-left text alignments. And we had seen this before with the Arabic Stone-Tongue Basilisk, but how little they remembered. So I told them I could read the card. The judge smiled, immediately walked over to the mic and told everyone on the PA system how to say it, and said in English, "Repeat after me, Tehirah." The struggle never ends. Story rundown. Here's the story, as brief as I can get it. Kamal has seized the Mirari from Chainer and seeks to get away from the Cabal Patriarch. He put it into the hilts of his sword and slew countless thousands of Cabal minions and their beasts, just trying to defend his barbarian kinsfolk, but he grew tired of his ceaseless killing. So he goes to the Eterian Forest and decides to give up all the fighting and sticks the Mirari sword into the ground, causing the forest and its inhabitants to mutate and start to overrun the war-torn remains of Otarian civilization. I won't lie, this story isn't particularly compelling, and they keep running with Kamal's crew for another block. Fighting and challenge and fighting tonight. Everybody's fighting and challenging and fighting and... This block was unsatisfying for me story-wise. I would have been happier if it ended with rocks fall, everybody dies. Let's check out the incarnations. One cool feature of this set were 7 incarnations, creatures 1 in each color plus 1 extra for green and white. The uncommons gave you a state-based effect as long as you had an appropriate basic land. The rares had mana costs, and the incarnations did awesome things for you in combat as long as they were in the graveyard. Protection from any color for your team, Trample, Swamp Walk, Haste, First Strike. Now, the most famous of the cycle is Wonder, which went right into Blue-Green Madness since it gave all your creatures flying. I mean, that's amazing. Oh yeah, and the most famous of Judgment cycles is the Wish series. The Wishes made an immediate impact on all number of constructed formats. Now, before you get your hopes up, in a tournament setting, Wishes could only get cards exiled from the game or from your sideboard. In more casual formats, well, it was up to your playgroup. If they're lenient, you get to go through your trade binder or wherever you keep all your cards and dig out one card of the appropriate type. That's crazy. Wishes revolutionized the players' built tournament decks so they could get silver bullets. Cunning Wish could get Perish, or your fourth copy of Circular Logic. Living Wish could get Collar of the Claw against Wrath of God, or Benevolent Bodyguard, or whatever the perfect fatty was for the situation. Lots of decks started running 3-ofs for their best cards because they had 4 tutors for that fourth copy. As per usual, Blue's Wish got instants, Black got anything at a huge price, Red got sorceries, White gets enchantments and artifacts, and Green gets lands or creatures. The green one's probably the best because it's cheap if you look at... I mean, that's my opinion. The white one has lots of applications, but it costs 5, which is entirely too much. The red one, well, we'll get to the red one. The Phantoms. These menacing creatures came into play with a certain number of +1/+1 counters on them, and every time they were dealt damage, their controller just took one of the counters off. Couple this with Glorious Anthem, or some other effect that increases their toughness, and they're unkillable. Eventually very small, but still unkillable. Now, I don't like these guys because they turn combat into a tedious, repetitive chore, but if you really enjoy intricate red zone maneuvers, you may want to add them to your cube. The most famous of the cycle is Phantom Centaur, who has really solid stats and protection from black. Phantom Nishoba, oh god, this ginormous 7/7 who just keeps on getting you life. Very worthy 7-drop, but when I see it on the other side of the table, it's like when I'm playing lots of classic JRPGs. I just yell, just die already! Red and blue got an annoying cycle, the Nightmares. Unlike Torment's Nightmares, which took something from an opponent away for a period and returned it when removed, these Nightmares took something away from the caster. Soul Gorger Org knocks you to 1 life. World Gorger Dragon takes away all your other permanents. I mean, holy crap. Now, Blue's Nightmares were harsh in different ways, docking you lands, other creatures, a turn, or, yeah, your hand. Now, unlike Madness, these Nightmares just felt bad, with negligible gain. The only card that came out of this cycle in Constructed was World Gorger Dragon, who could provide infinite mana loops with Animate Dead, so long as you have something that breaks the loop. Cards of note. Battle Screech. Did you like Lingering Souls? How about Spectral Procession? If you like dumping cheap flying tokens into play, the first one of record is Battle Screech. This one's got an initial investment of 4 mana, yeah, that's a lot, but as long as you have an untapped white creature when you play it, you can immediately flash it back and get 4 flyers in a turn. Now, I'm not saying that this card is going to replace Lingering Souls, but if you want one more token producer, you could definitely do worse. Battle-wise, Aven, okay. This is just a perfectly fine Pauper common that gives just enough threshold flavor without being unfair. I like this card in my cubes as a cheap peasant mediocre card, but with just enough upside that you don't feel too bad playing it. Benevolent Bodyguard. This ain't Mother of Runes, but for Pauper cubes, this is a perfectly respectable card that saves one of your better ones. I don't like the way Mother of Runes comes up boards, so this one definitely gets the nod. Commander Isha. It's rare to get protection from creatures on a creature, but here it is. Now, if you can give Isha Shroud or Hexproof, you might have an okay commander, but it's not kicking my Elish Norn out of my current white EDH deck. Want a great combat trick at the right price for a Pauper cube? Guided Strike, my good man. Just a little pump. First strike, this isn't going to close a game out, but it will win an important combat. and it has my 3 favorite words ever in Magic on it. Oh yes. Who doesn't love drawing a card? Ray of Revelation. For my money, this is the best spot enchantment removal spell ever printed. It isn't hard to run green to get double duty out of this spell, and the price is right. Solitary Confinement. This is the joys of being MC Hammer. You can't touch this. Preventing all damage and giving you hexproof, well, this is incredibly potent. But of course, the puzzle is, how do you keep it going? I mean, look at that upkeep cost. How do you keep this online? Well, there are a number of ways, such as Squee, Goblin the Bob, but at the time when this was in Standard, it didn't work. I actually piloted a deck with Solitary Confinement to a win at my local Friday Night Magic using the following means. Howling Mine, Obsessive Search, Wrath of God. Now, the trick of this deck is that it was okay to have the confinement fall off because you'd be drawing a crap ton of cards with Howling Mines and other cards that let you draw multiples, and using Wrath to keep the board from being lethal on the crackback. Oh, and the best way to keep your hand fed? Alright, Unifying Theory. Yeah, that's really a card. Okay, Unifying Theory, in this deck, it was awesome because it turned all your spells into cantrips and got your opponents that much closer to being decked. That was the only way you could win. Anyways, today technology has advanced to the point where confinement can be circumvented in a whole number of ways. But this is one of my favorite pet decks of yesteryear. Spelljack. Finally! The counter spell we always wanted. We can hijack a spell and cast it for free for ourselves later on when we need it. The only downside? Okay, it's a big one. I mean, 6 mana. That is a whole lot for a counter spell. But if your blue EDH deck wants some late game shenanigans, this will do the business. Morality Shift. Whoa! Dude! Man, I wish I had my fake mustache. Cats and dogs living together, mass hysteria! This card is rather unkind, but in kitchen table formats, you'll probably get this to work once. Now, nothing else in Magic does anything like this. Just to be clear, though, this is chaotic and unexpected, but in a way that isn't too shocking. Warp World and Possibility Storm are pants-on-head crazy. Everybody likes pants-on-head crazy. But Morality Shift can be extremely unkind and tick lots of people off. And here is one of the most expensive uncommons of Magic, Cabal Therapy. This innocuously named card, massage therapy, aromatherapy, retail therapy, oh, Cabal Therapy, ugh. Well, this takes a surgical approach to a player's hand, taking out every copy of a card that could cause serious problems. However, its most common use today is self-inflicted, as Reanimator mages want a simple, cheap method of dumping an expensive card into the graveyard. Cabal Therapy's versatility and ability to turn a chump into extra card advantage fodder through flashback makes it the best at what it does. Guilt Feeder was a nasty 5-drop that was able to sneak through enemy lines due to its fear. Better yet, it got through the 7th edition artifact combination of Ensnaring Bridge and Grafted Skullcap. Now, I got an F&M win out of this guy. I'm sure this was me at the height of my Johnny phase. Before equipment, there was Sutured Ghoul. This guy was used in various Reanimator decks along with Anger to punish enemies in one big Voltron-like swing. There were other werewolves in Magic before this guy, but they were horrible. And okay, this guy wasn't the hottest. Now, Innistrad, I'm so happy this was a set that finally did werewolves justice. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Before there was Tribute, there was the original Punisher mechanic, and this block is where it's from. Now, the most famous Punisher card is Browbeat, an uncommon that really says 2R, deal 5 damage to target player unless they have 5 or less life. Except in extremely tempo-driven formats, this card was actually quite solid. There are some lousy monocolored legends in Magic's history. General Yarkilt comes to mind, but Jeska, Warrior Adept and Kamal's sister, She has haste, she has first strike, but she only hits for half as much in the red zone as her brother, and can only do a little ping as opposed to her brother's mighty bolt. I find this disparity unsettling and possibly paternalistic. She's not the worst mono-red general, but she's up there. Getting a +3/+3 aura for 2G is a reasonable price in Limited. The one that's most famous is Moldervine Cloak from Ravnica, since you can keep casting it repeatedly due to the dredge. But Elephant Guide's upside, replacing itself when it leaves play with a 3/3 elephant, is perfectly respectable. Now, this card got an homage in Time Spiral, Griffin Guide. Genesis. I must say, as a child of the 80s, it does what Nintendo don't. Genesis's stats are unimpressive, but if you can keep him in the graveyard, you're going to pretty much always have some ability to stay in the game. Now, I'm a huge fan of this guy in EDH. I have a Japanese foil for my mainstay, and I usually don't play EDH to win games, but I definitely play in order to stay in them and do stuff. And that's what Genesis does. If someone blows up the world, you're not going to have to blow on the cartridge to get the game going again. Torment got Sengir Vampire as a reprint. What does Judgment get? Urnham Jin? Well, now this guy was fairly easy to get back in the day thanks to being reprinted in Chronicles, and was one of the largest green guys of its day. Yeah, 4 or 5 for 4, with a serious drawback. You just hope that your opponent would be playing Birds of Paradise, so that could be the guy who gets Forest Walk. Or you could get rid of the drawback with Armageddon. Looking at Standard today, Holocronos puts this guy to shame. Wizards printed Seed Time as a way to claim that they knew blue was unfairly dominant in tournaments, and they wanted to give green a powerful hoser. Seed Time was not the hoser they were looking for. An incredibly situational Time Walk is just not enough, but I do love the Rebecca Guay art. Here's another invitational card. Olerod got the Vulcaneers for this one, and he was a great buddy for your other, more valuable creatures. And yes, Sylvan Safekeeper was a good way to threaten Threshold. This is definitely not the worst invitational card. The gold card everyone remembers from this set is Mirari's Wake. This card is brutal, any way you slice it. Glorious Anthem? Check. A one-sided Mana Flare? Also check. For 5 mana, this is a steal, considering that if you look at Shadowmoor, Mana Reflection, this card only doubles your mana production without the Anthem effect, and it costs 6. Yeah, I know. The gold element of Mirari's Wake locks lots of decks out of playing it, but this card was dominant at multiple points in Odyssey Onslaught Standard. Wizards only prints really good cards for Pro Tour promos, and this one got the nod. Final verdict. The biggest flaw of Judgment is that it doesn't shout its theme hard enough. Yeah, to balance the block out, it had to have 2 colors dominate, since they both got screwed with Torment. But Green and White's run isn't quite impressive enough. There are no new mechanics, and the Advocate shtick was just a bridge too far. When you look at all the blue and red nightmares, the underlying problem of Odyssey block becomes apparent. Rosewater calls this block the spikiest block of all time, and I agree, he was right. The way to win was through finding bizarre forms of card advantage to manage your resources, and bad players made lots of people just lose in a frustrating fashion. So if all you want to do in Magic is outplay your opponent, then the block, and Judgment in particular, is fine. But for people who want the intrinsic gameplay to be enjoyable, this set, and the block as a whole, it's a failure. The reason I like Torment the best out of the block is that it gives players a good feeling, letting black corrupt their play and their deck and feeding them with power. Judgment doesn't have that visceral quality to it. and that severely limits the appeal. The set does have one major saving grace, the Wish Cycle, which radically altered deck building methods and did something we'd never seen before, and that added a major fun factor to the game. There's a lot of popper goodness in the set for cube builders as well. Look at Anger and Wonder. These are absolute staples for their colors, and they're cheap to boot. Financially, when we look at the value per pack, Judgment is the best investment in Odyssey block. But in my book, fun factor trumps all, and I'm going to give Judgment a 4.5 out of 10. Slightly below average. But believe me, this set is still worth your time. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Now, here's an important thing. I need your feedback. What block should I tackle next? Should I move forward to Onslaught block? Or should I go back and cover Masks block? I'm legitimately torn between the two, so I'm going to open the floor to you guys and go with what you guys say. So give your thoughts in the comment section below. Please be sure to hammer on that like button, and if you haven't subscribed yet, think about it, please. Don't forget you can get in touch with me on Modo, you can get in touch with me on Facebook or Twitter. This is Eli Kaplan, signing off for Ancestral Recall. Good games, and good luck.